Welcome to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the McFeely Mess Podcast. And frankly, the pod has gone away for a while, but we're dusting it off today for I think, a pretty cool reason. Over the course of the summer, I decided to put together a project in which I had named the top 75 North Dakota State football games during their time in the Football Championship Subdivision. And hopefully, as you're listening to this, you've had the chance to read the stories I've written and have been published online at Inforum.com or in our electronic edition, which is also available online. You've been able to maybe look over the list of 75 games that are online, put it in a really cool file that includes a capsule of each game, a photo of the forum that day, chronicling that victory or that loss in some cases, and then you can move on to the next. And I need to give a shout out before we get too far into it. Rob Beer, our sports editor at the forum, was a champion in trying to do all the coding and doing all that by hand, trying to get out that list together. And so as a companion to all of that, what we want to do today with a roundtable here at Forum Communications is maybe spend a tiny bit of time on those top 75 Bison games, but mostly really focus on the game that I chose, nobody else chose, as the number one game, in my opinion, of the last, 21 years of Bison football, and the top 2 and 3 games as well. And we're going to hash it over. We might argue a little bit, but I hope not too much. But we're just sort of kind of, as they say, chop it up with a panel of experts about which game is number one, which game is number 2, yada, yada, yada. If you've had the benefit, again, of reading, and I hope you have, you'll know that I chose the 2007 NDSU victory over Minnesota as the top Bison game in FCS, 27-21, October 20th, 2007 at the Metrodome. The number 2 game that I selected was NDSU 23, Iowa 21 on September 17th, 2016 at Kinnick Stadium. And that's a pretty good ball game, if you recall. And I think some Bison coaches, current and former, would disagree that should be number 2, but we can talk about that. And number 3 on the list is the one that I think probably many people and a couple of guys in this room will choose as their top game, which is NDSU 24, Kansas State 21, August 30th, 2013, at Bill Snyder Family Stadium in Manhattan, Kansas, on a day that was about 275 degrees on the artificial turf. There is no right or wrong answer. There are reasons why each game could be number 1. And frankly, if somebody out there listening or one of these guys in this room with me would have said that they chose the 2016 Iowa game, I couldn't argue too vociferously against that. And so before I get to the introductions of who's here, and I'm sure you already know who's here with me, let me just throw this out there before we start talking about it, is part of the deal with this project was the definition of top game is admittedly somewhat nebulous. I didn't really have a strong, hardcore definition of what the top game is and what it would consist of. It's things like impact, it's historic, it's surprising, it's memorable, things like that. But in the end, what I decided was what 75 games since 2004 when NDSU went Division I, what 75 games made NDSU football what NDSU football is in 2025? And when people think of what NDSU football is, what games made them that way? And so that goes into also the game that I picked number 1, which is that Gophers Bison game. And so without further ado, and that was a lot of ado, I want to welcome in my panel of experts who, by the way, all consulted on this project as well. We texted a lot. We talked a lot. We swapped information. But Jeff Kolpack, who is the longtime beat writer for the Forum, who's covered NDSU football since 1995, is with us. Eric Peterson, who's helped cover NDSU football for a number of years for the Forum as well. And Dom Izzo, the WDAY sports reporter, talk show host, one-time sports director, who has covered NDSU football for since 2006, and who is now the voice of the Bison on television for their contract. So, boys, we can't all talk at once here, but thanks for doing this. I greatly appreciate you sitting in with me.
Well, I want to disagree with you right off the bat a little bit here on there's no right or wrong answer on number one, because I know I'm right on this.
Okay.
It's going to be the University of Minnesota game, I think, in 2007. And the reason I say that.
Well, let's just before you get into that, let's just stop. And I know that you guys have had a chance to kind of look over some of this list from 1 to 75, and I know that once you get down past 20 or 25, you could probably, in a lot of cases, throw a dart at the dartboard and just say, okay, what's the difference between number 45 and number 65? But I had to make decisions and I had to do some things. But it I don't know if you guys feel this way, but when I started doing this, I kind of thought, guys, I started off at 100, to be honest with you, and then I thought that's probably too many. But as you get into it, and if you read the 45th game, for example, it's not bad. I mean, there's just a ton of good football games.
The Colorado NDSU game last year was pretty darn good.
So number 45 is a game that was incredible just in terms of national publicity and outcome. And
Hail Mary at the end.
And Cam Miller being fantastic. And that, to me, Eric, that's the part of this that, I mean, so many of these games would be number one on a lot of programs' lists, and some of them are number 20 or 25.
Well, I mean, even look at the top one. So I'll tell you my top three in the order. Just a little spoil. We'll get into it more. Just a quick intro. Kansas State would be my number one. Then 2A would be the Iowa game. I was splitting hairs on those two. The third one would be the 2007 Gophers in my eyes. Here's some of my reasoning. The 2006 game for me was more eye-opening because that was like their first foray.
Gopher game.
Yeah, the Gopher game. Sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Because I would remember talking in the newsroom, everyone's like, oh, do they have a chance against the Gophers? And I said something, yeah, they've beat Ball State. They beat, some of these other FBS teams, but this is a Big Ten team. I know NDSU's been pretty good, but this is just, and it was Glenn Mason coached at the time, so it wasn't like they were the John Gutekunst Gophers or anything like that. It was just
not like the guy that was coaching the next year, for example.
Yeah, the Brewster.
When they beat him. Yeah.
But it was 10. That was like, that perked my eyes up. Like, oh, wait a minute. They can go toe-to-toe that wasn't fluky. They had a chance to win it at the end with the field goal. So that's why the 2007 game, while still big, I just downgraded just a slight tick because I just saw this the year before and it didn't shock me that it was still a big thing to win, but it didn't shock me that they competed.
But I think, Jeff, where you were going to go before I interrupted you was, I think you agree with me that the 2007 Gophers game is number one in your mind.
Yeah, and I go back to somebody who closely watched this program in the 80s, frankly, sometimes in the 70s that I remember, and the 90s. And in those days, even as bad as the Gophers were, as bad as they were, there was the idea that there's no way this program in Fargo could ever come within 5 touchdowns. That was just the prevailing thought. And you're right, 2006 provided a little glimpse of that. But I thought in 2007, the wave just churned. And I'm talking about walking around downtown Minneapolis. I'm talking about the pregame. I think it was at the Depot, that where they drank them out of beer. And that was the first of several locations that didn't figure out that this group of fans
felt the wrath of Bison fans. Yeah.
And so I just thought that, that to me, the whole swath of momentum switched right there.
Dom, let's bring you in, Dom. You were here for all of this, and you have a different list as well from Jeff and I. So if your top three, what would your top? And I guess the reason I'm saying top three is I should point this out as well. Is I think as I was going through this list and talking to all you guys and Craig Bowl and Tim Polasek and Gene Taylor and Matt Larson and Tyler Roll and Chris Kleiman and all these guys, I think the top 3 games on my list are the ones that kept coming up that were out. It had to be one of those 3. And number 4 is actually the the Sam Houston.
That's my number 3.
The first first championship game, the Sam Houston game when NDSU beat Sam Houston. That's number 4. And number 5 is the Georgia Southern 2012 semifinal. And all those games came up in some context with these guys. But the 3 that kept coming up and which every former coach and player said, as well as us, were the 3. The Minnesota game 2007, Iowa 2016, and Kansas State 2013.
Yeah, Kansas State to me was number 1. Simply the situation around it, that Fox Sports created a new network, and the very first college football game they put on it was North Dakota State, 2-time reigning FCS champs against the reigning Big 12 champs in Kansas State. Kansas State was dedicating its stadium to Bill Snyder that night. Craig Bohl was going back to the place where he got fired after he was the defensive coordinator at Nebraska. And I just there's a couple things I remember. The fireworks going off at the press conference afterwards where we couldn't hear the Bison talking because they were dedicating the stadium that night. And Bohl, as emotional as he was, Craig never, the only other time I saw Craig get emotional, you'll remember this, was after they beat Georgia Southern the first time to go to Frisco. He welled up with tears. He was visibly emotional. And I'll never forget the following Saturday, the Bison were off, and we each got the same message from Gene Taylor that game day was coming. It changed everything. The Kansas State game changed everything after that because college game day was here the following week, and the train was rolling. The Bison fans had come to Frisco the first couple of years, but everybody wanted to be there for the 2013 title season when they beat Towson that year. That's what it was.
I actually saw Bohl get even more emotional after the Kansas State press conference. You remember we're all in that packed, it's hot.
The tent.
And he walks out a separate door, and he goes into the back of the press conference or the building, and he goes out to the field. He's there by himself, empty stadium. And you know what he was thinking. This is where I got fired at Nebraska when I gave up like 60 points. And that's where his Division I FBS dreams really got derailed. And I'm pretty sure he was moved to tears. I think I was trying to get sneak in. I didn't want him to see me, but he looked rather stoic and stoic emotional, if you will.
So the reason that I picked that game, the 2007 Gophers game, as number 1, ahead of Iowa and Kansas State, and you guys know because I was texting back and forth and we talked. This was not something where I just said it was obvious it's the Gophers game, but talking with Craig Bohl, which I did for this project.
Shout out to that Bohl talked to you on that. That's
good. And thank you to Craig. He's, I mean, he hasn't had a lot of contact with the NDSU program or the Fargo media, but he gave me a call and we had a nice conversation. But I think if he obviously brought up Kansas State and the Minnesota game, but he said that the Gophers game just sort of changed everything. The 2007 Gophers game, because it made people in the upper Midwest sit up and take notice. That the game that Eric referenced, the 2006 game, they lost that game. They should have won. Yeah. They actually had the better team, but they lost the game. And we know from covering NDSU all these years that there's a lot of teams that almost beat NDSU that didn't. East Tennessee State almost beat NDSU last year. Didn't do it. Doesn't matter. It's over. The Gophers the Bison didn't win that 2006 game, but in 2007, they did. And it changed everything around the program. It changed the way people outside of Fargo looked at NDSU.
Donations.
In the upper Midwest. And in some ways, it changed the way the Bison looked at themselves. That everybody knew that they were a good FCS team. They knew the Division II history. But NDSU was still looked at as, not even at that point, JV. They were looked at as the B squad. So they're beating up on Augustana and Morningside. Big whoopee deal. Okay, wow, they upset Montana in Division I. A big deal. But when you beat a Big Ten team, no matter how bad it is, and that was a bad Gophers team, they did it, and people went, oh, my goodness gracious. And they showed up on SportsCenter that night. Tyler Roll ran for 263 yards in the iconic play where he takes the little swing pass from Steve Walker. And as you said, Jeff, downtown Minneapolis was packed with NDSU fans. There's probably 20,000 of them in the Dome. And if you watch those highlights on YouTube or wherever, it's louder for the Bison than it is for the Gophers when the Gophers do something well. And that just made everybody, I think, in this region just go, wow, okay, these guys are legit. And that's what Tyler Roll told me. He played in that game, and he had some sort of contact with all the other games. And he actually picked the Iowa game, by the way, as number one, Tyler did, which is part of my package of my story. But he said, I'm putting this 2007 Gophers game number 2 because that was a statement game. Is that we made a statement that we're not just going to mess around and beat up on a bunch of teams in 1AA or FCS. We're going to compete with the Big Ten teams as well. And it's what they've done all these years.
Well, okay, why I put the Kansas State slightly ahead of that was 2007, all that fanfare doesn't happen if they get their doors blown off in 2006. So if they'd have lost 42-7 in 2006 against the Gophers, do you think they'd have that same level of excitement for 2007? So I think part of it is like 2006 almost led into 2007. The other reason I have Kansas State, they were just coming off a BCS Bowl. They were a ranked team. The Gophers, like you said, were like a bottom-level team. To me, if you just beat the Gophers and don't follow that up with anything, well, we've seen FCS teams beat power FCS teams. Who beat, like Jacksonville State beat Florida State. You know what I mean? It happens where you beat a big name-brand school. But then you follow that up with a ranked team at home, on Fox, game day comes. And not only that, you get ahead, and then it was going crazy in there. Tyler Lockett was just running through the secondary. They lost the lead and everything seemed hopeless. And you go on this amazing 16 play, 90, 80, whatever.
There was 18 plays, something 80 yards.
Yeah.
Yep.
A third and
the drive, capital T, capital D.
the
I mean, a 3rd and 11, you check it down to Derek Lang, you get it. But to me, the lasting image was as that drive went on, like the Kansas State defensive line wanted no part of the NDSU offensive line. They were burying guys. They looked like the power conference team, and Kansas State looked like the FCS team. So even just to dominate, and I know Kansas State had a new quarterback in Jake Waters. It wasn't, Colin Klein, the guy who led them, but they just overpowered them. And like the heat index and whatever, the pickle juice they drank the night before, they were the team that was more...
Salt.
Yeah, whatever it was. They were the team that had more, I don't know what you call it, more stamina or got stronger as the game went on, as opposed to Kansas State, which you think would be the opposite because they have more scholarships, more depth, and then just the iconic, Brock Jensen spinning in the end zone, then going right up to the camera and pointing like, hey, I mean, to me, that was even a more big national moment because it's on a national, everyone was the only game going on. And I know the Gophers around here is a bigger thing, but I think that might have even made them more of a national type thing, just that game.
Yep. Let me expand on that because that's a great point, is that I agree that the Kansas State game put them on the national map, and that cannot be discounted. And so you're absolutely right. Something else that came up that I brought up actually with some of the coaches and ADs I talked to is the Gophers team was awful. I mean, they were 1-11. They finished 1-11 that year. They were terrible. And so I acknowledge that. The Kansas State team was the defending Big 12 champion, and they were legit. They ended up 8-5 that year. I think they beat Michigan in a bowl game that year, and so that was a much better win in terms of on the field stuff. The best one of them all, according to everybody, was the Iowa game. The Iowa was the best team that they played, and what Tim Paulsek said was, and he was a part of the second two, but not the Gophers game. As Tim said, from what I understand, that the Gophers weren't very good. And Craig Bohl said, when we watched the film of that Gophers team, because this was not the season opener, it was like the 3rd or 4th game of the season, if I recall.
The Gopher game?
Yeah.
Actually, it was the middle part
of the
It was the middle part of the season.
But Craig said they watched film, and they just said, Craig said, we're everybody's as good as these guys. He goes, there's no question. What Paulsek told me was he was not at NDSU in 2013, but he said he knew a little bit about both programs, and he said the Bison will have no trouble physically with Kansas State. It's taking everything else into account, it's whether you make the plays, how it all comes out. But he said when I saw the Kansas State team watching it on TV, And what I knew of the teams, I said, NDSU they'll be fine. It's whether they win the game or not. He said, when we were getting ready for Iowa in 2016, that was big boy football.
Yeah.
I mean, that was two programs that were built on physicality and just brute strength up front on both sides of the ball. And that's why he and others picked the Iowa game as number one, because it just, like Tyler Roll said, man, that was two similar football teams. They were a good Big Ten team. They had they had a number of NFL guys.
George Kittle.
As did Kansas State, a couple. But everybody said, boy, that the Iowa game was just two titans just slugging it out. And Roll said, it wasn't trickery. We didn't do anything special. We put in no special things. We just lined up and played Bison football, and we beat them playing Iowa football. I said that's what was so satisfying, was that we won it. The way that we built our program to be is how we won that game.
And I think the net rushing totals bear that out. I think NDSU ran for more than 200, and Iowa ran for like 50 or 40 some net yard. Like they outrushed a Big Ten team that hangs their hat on ground and pound by like 150 yards. George Kittle was on that team. Desmond King was on that team. Jalil Johnson was on that team. Beathard was at quarterback. All these guys are NFL guys. And I think what even stuck, and that's why I have it a close second to Kansas State. They went for two to try to win the game. They didn't get it. Yeah. Then they get another stop and put together another drive, and they hit a walk-off field goal. I mean, and Chris Kleiman's from Iowa. You want to just put all the storylines. Chris Kleiman's first game, was that his, wait. No,
the Iowa State game.
But Chris Kleiman's from Iowa still, and they go back and win there. And
hey, stop it before you change my mind.
Okay. Sorry, man.
I remember vividly out of that the Bison offensive line owned Iowa's defensive line. The offensive line that day was Colin Connor, Landon Leckler from Beach, North Dakota. He was the Valley Offensive Lineman of the Week because he didn't allow a sack in that day. You had Austin Coonert. You had guys from smaller town. I know Cooner's from Sioux Falls. Jack Planker started from Kindred. You had two North Dakota guys manhandling the Iowa defensive line. And the Bison, I think Stick got sacked twice in that game. And as Eric's pointing out, at the end of the game, NDSU moved, in the fourth quarter, the Bison moved the ball twice to either set up the field goal they missed and obviously the game-winning touchdown. Because remember, they missed a field goal in the fourth quarter as well. Cam missed from Peterson, missed roughly in that range. It was in that same range that he missed. That, to me, stood out because it seemed like I was on the sidelines shooting highlights that day. Like, this is a carbon copy of what happened in Manhattan. The Bison have the ball at the end of the game.
You had Easton Stick, too, who I think will go down, and it's my opinion, as I think the greatest leader of this program so far in the Division I era. I think he's that good, that poised, that calm, still in the NFL. Just so you have that guy engineering those drives. I mean, he was an amazing quarterback at the FCS level and Division I level for that matter.
Well, here's a few things that stuck out to me about that game. Early in the game, I believe you had Pierre G. Tucker coming off the edge for a blitz, hit the quarterback, ball pops in the air. About MJ Stump takes it in for a touchdown. Yeah. That's one moment that stood out. Then Stick's quarterback draw on the game-winning drive. You're like, they just drove it down the field and they tried to hit Chase Morlock on the wheel route for the 2-point conversion. Do they have another drive in them? And when Stick, I think, was like 16, 17, 18 yards on first down, I go, all right, they're in business again.
I'll tell you the story behind that because Chris Kleiman told me what the story behind that was Iowa, through a series, they tried to throw the ball when they ran they didn't run 3 plays. I think they passed twice on their previous series, if I'm not mistaken.
And they tried like a draw on third down.
Right, and so then NDSU was able to get the ball back with a fair amount of time left. And so Chris says, well, they punt to us, we get it at whatever it was, the 30-yard line or whatever. And he goes, I don't know if we're going to be able to move the ball or not. He goes, Iowa's bowing up. This is crunch time now. He said on first down, Tim Polsek was the offensive coordinator, now the head coach. He said, Tim made the greatest call ever. He said, we hadn't run a quarterback draw in about 3 years. So there was nothing on film that Iowa would have known that we were going to run that play.
Wow.
And Tim dials up a quarterback draw, and Easton busted for it was 29 yards. He said busted for about 30 yards. And he said, when Easton did that, and we got down inside their 40, he goes, okay, wow, all right, now we're going. Here we go. Let's do this. And that So Chris was like, what are we going to do? Pulsick makes the great call. Kleiman goes, well, let's win this damn thing. Let's go.
Well, a couple quick follow-ups. You bring up Easton Stick, but Easton Stick wasn't the Easton Stick we know at the end of his career. Like, that was almost like a coming out party for Easton Stick. Is he wasn't the year before where he kind of jumped in for Carson Wentz and Wentz comes back.
He did.
So this was kind of his first year as the starter without, nobody behind him. He was the guy. And he makes that big play, the big drive. The other thing that sticks out about that might have cost him the national championship that year. They talked so many times about that non-conference. They had 2 overtime games before that. And I think that was the last game Nick DeLuca played before having shoulder surgery. I think physically that game took something out of them. And maybe James Madison beats him anyways down the road because James Madison was very good that year. But that took a lot out of that team.
Another little tidbit that I found out about was, and I think Chris Kleiman said at the time, but they went for 2 for the win at Iowa, not only because he was going to try to win the game, but because their first 2 games, the Iowa game was the 3rd game of the season. Their first 2 games were just absolute meat grinders against Charleston Southern and then Eastern Washington. And both of those games went overtime. And so part of what Chris's thinking is that I don't want to go overtime again because we're just, how much do we have left in the tank? And so he decided, so part of it was, yes, trying to win the game at the time, but part of it as well was, we've already gone overtime twice. Let's just try to end this thing so we don't have to keep. And that's what Tyler Roll brought up as a top factor in him picking Iowa. He goes, we went overtime the first 2 weeks of the season. He goes, I don't want to say we're spent, but my God, you just have 2 absolute grinders the first 2 weeks of the season.
And it was hot. It was hot at Kinnick Stadium, too.
And then we're playing just playing an absolute physical game against Iowa, and then we find a way to win after we play the 2 overtimes. Let me say, go ahead.
The last drive, just by the way, Iowa went rush for a loss of 2, Rush lost 1, and then Beathard got sacked by Robbie Grimsley. I'll never forget that.
So
they tried to throw it on 3rd down, and they lost 9 yards and backed them up, and then the punt wasn't very good.
Right.
The Bison got the ball at the 34-yard line, and then the rest is history.
So let me throw this in there because I referenced this word multiple times in the words that I wrote on this project. But I one of the reasons why I picked the Gophers game in 2007 as number 1 is I think context is really important in this discussion that we're having. It's all for fun. It's, we're guys sitting around a bar, drinking a beer or a soda, hashing things over and arguing. But context is really important. And then, the Kansas State game was massive because of all the things we've talked about. But also, it was sort of like, well, yeah, but they've already beat some FBS teams, even though none as big as Kansas State. Iowa was massive. But it's like, well, yeah, but they've already beaten Kansas State, Minnesota. They've already won 5 national championships.
That was their 6th FBS win in a row.
And when they beat Kansas State, I actually kind of sort of offended Gene Taylor when I said, the Kansas State game puts you on the map nationally. He goes, we'd already won 2 national championships by then and won a bunch of FBS games. So he goes, I don't know that it put us on the map, or I don't know if we're under the radar because people knew who we were, but he said certainly that brought it to a different level. But the context part of it for the Gophers game is, in that moment in 2007, nothing else had happened yet. Yeah. And so you have to go back in time and think about at that moment how big it was. And it's the same word I use with the Ball State game, which is, I think, 9th on my list. I don't have it right in front of me. But the Ball State game, people might look at that and go, why does McFeely have Ball State in the top 10? It's Ball State. But in the context of 2006, when they beat Ball State, that was treated like winning the Super Bowl. I mean, I have a photo. If you look through these capsules online, the front of the sports page of the Forum is a huge photograph of Craig Bowl being doused with Gatorade by his players. And I asked, pat on the back for McFeely, I asked after they beat Ball State, my column that day was, okay, so should they go FBS? Because they beat Ball State. And I asked Gene Taylor that question on the field in Muncie, Indiana. He said, whoa, hey. Let's pump the brakes here, Captain, a little bit. But, I mean, it at the time, it seemed like they had just beaten the 1985 Bears.
Yeah.
or 86 Bears, whatever it is.
Well, and I think, may I interject here? And you mentioned we talked about East and Stick and quarterbacks. I think we can't go any farther and without bringing up Steve Walker, because he was the guy who engineered the Gopher win. He was the guy who engineered that rally against Ball State. And what a great play to Travis White. Incredible pass.
They had a Hail Mary at the end of the first half in that game.
Brian Shawn, who was also a consultant on this project, who works at Sanford now, but he was a long time the TV voice of NDSU, covered him for a long time. He says he recalls he was at Channel 11 at the time as the sports director, sports reporter. They sent a crew out to the airport to greet the Bison walking off the plane after they beat Ball State. And he said Bull walked off the plane with a Ball State helmet and went, "We didn't just beat them, we beat them." That the type of stuff that Craig would do. And he said people were like, there were fans gathered at Hector after the Ball State. Now, if NSU beats Ball State today, it's like a big whoopee deal.
Yepper.
But also Tyler Jangula sacrificing his ACL, diving into the end zone. God bless his memory.
Well, and to Mike's point, at some point you don't know what you don't know yet. Because early in this FCS stuff, when NDSU, like not James Madison, Robert Morris would come to town, or Lehigh, we'd like, is this going to be a close game? And now we like kind of know better. Like, no, NDSU's the conference they play in, the just year in and year out, the competition's better. I don't know where it is on the list. I don't think it qualifies for the list. How impactful was when NDSU first won at Montana. Now, if they win at Montana, no one would even like blink an eye. But it's like you said, context does matter in this. So but the other thing, to Dom's point, his number 3 one is Sam Houston. What is more important, the national championships or the FBS victories? And I've asked so many players this. They go, part of me likes, the FBS wins are great because you get on SportsCenter, you get on whatever national highlight show, but in the end, the national championships are still what you play for. So then what do you value more, getting on the national radar or being a national champion? And now what NDSU is known for is just now they've won 10 of them. Like just as a whole, 10 of them. But early on, maybe you needed some of those FBS pops to kind of get things rolling.
That first one, I'll never forget, just of all the stuff we didn't, to Erie's point, we didn't know when we went down there. And the game, I went back, I do that countdown every year, so I go and watch some back. That was a good football game. The Sam Houston NDSU first one. The Bison were trailing at halftime. They couldn't do anything offensively, and Matt Voigtlander, another Polisic play that they decided to run the fake punt. And how long they've been sitting on that for a couple of years. Voigtlander, the former running back, got the first down. The next play was the middle screen arrow.
the now banished middle screen.
Right.
And PJ McNorton scored a touchdown. It was a huge deal. I think just the fans that came, they were 2 years removed from winning 3 football games. I remember distinctly asking Gene Taylor how many games Craig Bohl had to win in 2010 to keep his job. And then here we are 2 years later, and they won the whole freaking thing. It was just
headline
amazing.
of the Forum, Golden Boys.
Yeah.
And by the way, we all wondered, well, wow, I mean, that's never going to happen. I mean, they might not win another one. They might never win another one. Because we didn't know. To steal our line again, we didn't know what we didn't know. Funny story about the Sam Houston State game, the first one, because Chris Kleiman brought that one up as well and said that one's got to be up there somewhere because it was the first. It was the first one, and he goes, Sam Houston was legit. And we look at Sam Houston now and go, well, NDSU beat him 35-3 one year. Bruce Anderson ran for like 6 touchdowns untouched in that one semifinal in 20. So Sam Houston somewhat became kind of a punchline in Fargo. But Chris said that first Sam Houston team, he goes, they were legit defensively, and we were wondering how are we going to score against these guys. They were that good defensively because he said hey, things were different in 11 and 12 offensively. He goes, we just didn't have the different weapons that we had later. We were plenty good, but not what we became later.
Yeah. No Christian Watson's on that team.
But he said the defensive coaches were sitting in a meeting room at the hotel the night before the game. So it would have been Friday night before the game, and they're just grinding like okay, we have to play good defense tomorrow because our offense is going to have a hell of a time scoring. And he didn't mean it as a derogatory. He just said Sam Houston's good. So we're sitting there just grinding on every single detail the night before the game. He goes, some guy that Craig knew from Texas was kind of hanging around looking for Craig or talk. He pops his head in the meeting room and goes, hey, what are you guys doing? He goes, oh, we're going over the game plan. He goes, well, I don't know how you think you're going to win this game tomorrow. It's going to be a track meet. These guys run up and down the field like there's nobody else on the field. And Kleiman goes, oh, crap, except didn't use the word crap. He said, and we just were going nuts. We said we're going crazy after the guy said that. We thought we're going to get blown out of here tomorrow. They're going to run, they're going to run up and down the field. And he goes, we played great. We made the plays when we had to, and we got the first one.
Well, let me back you up one game before in the semi against Georgia Southern. And you say that, okay, you got one shot at it, right? That's what you're saying. They won one, and will it ever happen again? We were talking to Scotty Hazelton, defensive coordinator with Georgia Southern's triple option coming in. He hadn't slept. Like, he slept 2 hours a night, maybe. All the defensive coaches. Yeah. And I remember his quote. He goes, well, you only get one shot at it.
Yeah.
Think about that.
It's one game. I mean, it's one game.
A couple of things to your point. It was the Willie Fritz-led Sam Houston State team. Let's, differentiate. Some of the coaching changes, they were much more geared offensively. Willie Fritz, those defenses were good. And then a couple other things is, even in that year 2 one where it got away from him, I remember talking, one of the former players, it might have been Cole Jerick, or I think it was Cole Jerick, said, I think that game a Sam Houston linebacker got hurt early in the game, like hurt his knee. And one of them said, like, when he went down, that really flipped it, because early in the game, they said Sam Houston's defense was just almost as good as it was the year before. But once that guy went down, things kind of unraveled for him. But to Dom's point, I remember doing the post-game show after that one, and Dom asked the question, can they repeat? Can we do it again? And I go, well, I don't know, maybe. And if, Travis Beck, I got, a guy like that's got to pop the next year. And you had, they got a lot of young guys like Marcus Williams and Kyle Emanuel and Billy Turner. There's a chance. You got your quarterback back in Brock Jensen. So I'm like, there's a chance, but you never know. And all of a sudden,
going back to the context part of it, I was told by somebody who might know that. We talked about the Gophers being bad, and it's the Gophers. It's not a legit FBS team at the time. But when NDSU went Division I, remember the games had to be scheduled ahead of time. So when NDSU announced they were going Division I in 2002 or whatever it was, it is my understanding, and I didn't get a chance to confirm this with Gene, but Joel Maturi at the University of Minnesota said, okay, there's a Division I opponent for us. So he was calling Gene, saying, well, let's play these games. Let's play 06, 07. Let's play. And Gene's like, I got to talk to my guys. And I was told that there was great consternation among the coaching staff and among administrators at NDSU that didn't necessarily want to play those games.
Wow. Think about that.
Because they didn't know. They didn't know.
Right.
Like, I mean, the last thing you want to do is go down to Minneapolis after you've been running your mouth for all these years about playing the Gophers and go down there and get beat 45-7. So they what? As I said, once Craig saw the tape and they looked at the film, they went, we're going to be fine. But when they scheduled the games in 02 or 03, whatever it was, there was some great debate inside the NDSU offices about whether they should play these games. Maturi kept sweetening the pot. And finally, Gene just said, we need the paychecks. Yeah. We need the money. So we're going to play the games. Figure it out.
Wow, things have changed.
Right? And to your point, I'd heard that too, like the coaching staff, whether it was one or all of them, are we ready? We're not quite ready yet. And that's why that 2006 game just kind of dovetails in that 2007. In 2006, I thought they were going to, even though it was not a good goal.
10-9 with a chance to win with a field goal.
Yeah, Sean Beeble missed a field goal. It was blocked, I think.
He also missed one earlier in that game too.
And it's just like, they were just as good or better at the line of scrimmage. Their skill guys were just as good. And I'm like, wait, even it's a bad Big Ten team, it's still an FBS Big Ten team. And this is an FCS team. At that point, we didn't even know could win national they hadn't even won a national championship yet. I mean, they didn't have a chance to yet, but we didn't know that they were going to just run roughshod over the FCS. So it's like, we don't even know if they're good enough to beat the Eastern Washingtons and, the James Madison, and, the studs of the league, the Montanas at the time. And then they go and I know what you're saying. You still got to win the game, but I'm sure at that point, Bowles like, well, we'll sign up for this game every year because we can compete.
Right. Let me read you a long quote from Gene Taylor about that Gophers game, just to put a bow on it, and we can quickly move on to something else. But
the 07 or the 06?
07.
Okay.
I just think that first Minnesota win because they played them again in 2011. Beat them
Somehow,
again.
how did they get that game scheduled?
Must have been before 07. I just think that first Minnesota win changed the tone of the fan base. Like, oh my, we can really do this. Similar to our win at Montana in 2003 when we were in Division II, but it just took it to a massive new level. To go to the Metrodome full of 60,000 people and kick their butts both physically and on the scoreboard, I think it brought out thousands of new fans for us. I remember walking around downtown Minneapolis and all you saw was green and gold. The bars were full of our fans, not their fans. It felt like a massive ball game. When we won it, it just changed the tone. We started selling out more. It was harder to get a ticket. People would spend more money for a ticket. It just changed so much. The coaches could go into Minneapolis or Wisconsin and recruit very differently. And that's something that came up with Gene Taylor, Craig Bowl, and Tyler Roll. What they knew was that when they beat the Gophers, that changed recruiting too, because they said we could recruit differently. He said, I don't know if that was the number one game or not, but I'll tell you in terms of changing a program's perception and direction, it has to rank right up there. So we've made our points. We've hashed everything over.
Well, I just want to add one thing quick. That shows the different perspective of being a coach and administrator. Like the recruiting, they see that firsthand.
Yes.
About, we don't see that. And we know if you win big games, your recruiting improves. And that's where beating a Midwest, like a regional opponent, maybe that does make that bigger because then they get better players and that leads to everything that happens after that.
And that was part of the interesting thing was that, talking to you guys, you get one perspective. Talking to the coaches, it's all about the coaching part of it. And a lot of it's on-field stuff. And it's like, okay, and then the administrators, whether it was Gene or Matt Larson, they kind of give a different perspective of, how can you, as I'm rubbing my fingers together in a podcast, how can we capitalize on this? And so we got to wrap it up here because we're at probably 45 minutes or so, somewhere thereabouts right now.
One quick thing, was that the Jeff Kolpack incident? Which Gophers game was that?
2006.
Oh, man.
I totally forgot about that.
Jeff knew he was in the FBS when that happened.
This is funny. So no, not that.
Okay.
The 2007 game, I had totally forgotten that's when Tim Brewster referred to NDSU as the little green guys.
I was at that press conference.
The little guys in green. And I had totally forgotten about that because I just, there's been so many games. But
WDAY sent me to that.
I think Gene or somebody brought that up and they said, the little green guys went down there. I went, oh my God, I forgot about that. Yep. And so I went back and read it and we wrote about it. You talked about it. And it turned out, as we know now, it actually is my headline on my main story about when I picked this game. It's the Bison or Little Green Guys No More after beating Minnesota in 2007. So I forgot about that in 2007. Yep. So my segue is thousands of people listening to this podcast, Jeff, have no idea what Eric was talking about.
We need to relive this.
So you need to relive this horrible memory.
2006, after the game, I go back to my hotel, and outside the hotel, this guy came out and started hitting people, and he punched me in the face. And just stunned me. And I wrote a blog post about
just rando, right?
Disgruntled reader?
Just random, yep. And I wrote a blog post next day and said the hardest hit by somebody from Minneapolis wasn't on the field at the Metrodome by somebody in maroon and gold. It was on Hennepin Avenue outside the whatever hotel. And then the local TV station there picked it up, and there it is.
I think Pat Royce, wrote a column on it. I have to look that up. Go back.
One more quick thing.
So good.
One more quick thing to put before we put on a bowl list, just to show you how solid this list is. Was it the 2011 Gophers game where Marcus Williams had the pick six, had the before halftime defensive touchdown? They win by like 2 scores. Was that even in the top 5? Like most programs, that would be like number one.
Be up there.
That was a beatdown.
Yeah. I mean, where was that ranked?
And that was a decent Gopher team. That was Jerry Kill.
Yeah.
That was his first year. You're right. That was his first year.
They weren't very good.
He was sweeping up the debris from the Tim Brewster era.
Right, yep.
Yep.
Marquise Gray was on that team. He was a good dual threat guy.
That game's
it's 2010. My bad. 2010.
No, it's number 10.
Number 10. Gotcha. 2011.
It was
Number
37-24.
That was a run of games, by the way. The Gophers lost 3 out of 4 years to the Dakotas. 07 they lost to the Bison. 2010 they lost to USD, and then 11 the Bison got them again, and then the Jacks played them in 19, and then that's
should have won.
Yeah,
they should have won that.
And that's
game.
been it. They have not played the Dakotas. They'll play UND in 2020.
So as I said, much of this list is as I was putting it together. And it was just a ton of fun, by the way. I don't mean to make this sound like it was some sort of, like I was, grinding away. It was just, it was hard work, but I had fun. But some of these games are just incredible football games that I've said would be number one for so many of their programs.
Kolpack's favorite, number 20, is the Rhett Bomar game. The Rhett Bomar game, the NDSU Sam Houston.
Electric.
Was the Dome, you want to talk about, at least for me, that was my second year in Fargo. That's when, to me, the Dome became a thing, because people left. The game was over, and Steve Walker.
Sam Houston scored with 50 seconds left, and so everybody got up and left, and then
Steve Walker leads the drive and hits Cole Heckendorf. That's my favorite Scotty Miller call of all time on that one. That's number 20.
What's Cal Poly when Walker hit Heckendorf from 80 yards?
That's 23.
That's 23.
And that's part of the problem with a list like this. I fully admit that is what's the difference between the Sam Houston game and the Cal Poly game? I guess maybe one of them was at home.
Sure. And
Rhett Bomar was unstoppable in that game.
And in those days, they weren't all on television. Like the Poly game was not televised. I remember
it was late at night. But part of I'm open to any criticism or critique on this because it's whatever. But let me just throw a couple things out there. We do have to wrap this up. Okay. But so a couple games that I didn't necessarily have really high on my list. In fact, one of them I did not have on my list.
Ooh.
Okay. And it ended up.
Period, you mean?
Period.
At all. Okay.
And it ended up number 16 after talking with coaches and ADs and Tyler Roll, is the Georgia Southern regular season game in 2006. And it was a 34-14 game. It was down in Statesboro. And part of it might have been that I didn't cover it. For whatever reason, I didn't go down there. And there's, some personal bias going on there just because I don't remember it all that well. But almost every coach, and certainly Tyler, brought up and said, that Georgia Southern game was an incredibly important game for us. Again, in the context of the time. Craig Bohl brought that up as one of his games. So that was a big, because at the time, Georgia Southern was the king of FCS.
I think it was a passing of the baton from Irk Russell, if you will, to the Bison program with a few years of leeway in between.
But Tyler Roll said Bohl built that game up to be that they were playing the New England Patriots. I mean, it was just the stadium is 20-some thousand people. They've won 6 national championships. This is the program we want to be. We're going to, we're probably not going to win this game. And Tyler said they just came out and just absolutely.
And that was 105 degrees. Are all these games fought in heat and all these monumental games except for the Dome?
And the other one that came up was that I had on the list but not super duper high was the Central Michigan victory in 2007.
Which I will say that's the best I've ever seen NDSU play. I will go down and say that.
44-14 that day.
That was the best game I've ever seen a Bison team play.
I have it at 21 on my list.
Pretty good.
And it was 44-14, but that Central Michigan team and Craig Bohl, who obviously had a huge influence on this list because he's the chairman of the board. Okay, I mean, the way that Craig talked about the Gophers game in 2007 is in the end probably what swayed me to pick that game. When Craig Bohl says that, he's the guy that got it all rolling, man. Sorry, no offense to Kleiman, Paulsek, or Matt Entz. By the way, I also talked to Matt Entz. By the way, I forgot to mention him. But when Craig Bohl says this game is really important, it carries a little more weight than maybe some other guys. But Craig Bohl brought up that Central Michigan game going, they were good. They lost to Purdue in the Alamo Bowl or something, 50-44. They were the defending MAC champions. Their quarterback was Dan Lefevre, who was an NFL draft choice. They had Antonio Brown at wide receiver, and they had J.J. Watt.
Tight end. He was a tight end, though.
At the time,
he wasn't a defensive end.
I mean, those guys were good. He's they were loaded, and we just absolutely destroyed them.
Another Tyler Jangula play in that game.
Yeah, he took a corner 7 yards back.
You asked, by the way, on this, I don't know if we have time for one game outside the top 20. I starred 2 of them. They were both from 2015. One was the season opener at Montana. That was before the FCS kickoff got cannibalized and week 0 became a thing, but that was the only game going in the country that day. Brent Musburger was there. I'll never forget. You talk about weather. We had the smoke We arrived to do our show maybe like 5 minutes before we were supposed to go on the air. The game was fabulous. It went down. Montana scored the winning touchdown with 1 second left. Chase Morlock punched out a fan that came near him.
And the best Bob Stitt post game.
Bob Stitt was the Montana coach. Was crazy.
Sound bite that you'll ever
But that was like
get.
Carson Wentz's introduction to the NFL, I think, as everybody got to see what Wentz could potentially become. And the other one was later that season, Mike, which we've talked about ad nauseum, was the Northern Iowa game in the regular season when that was
the 2015
the 2015 regular season game. Those were the two best teams in the country that year. I think they combined to score 5 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Jedry Sear scored a touchdown in that game.
That was the Darius Shepard game.
Shepard ended up scoring the game.
And that was my favorite Scotty Miller call, where the winning touchdown with Darius Shepard from Wentz.
Does he have it? Yeah.
Backpedaling catch in the end zone. Does he have it? And you can hear Phil go, he's got it.
Wait,
the place just went nuts.
Before we go, my favorite Scotty Miller call still to be the Cal Poly one.
Me
Are you
too.
kidding me? In the middle of the play.
Yeah.
Those were two outside the top 20.
Nice job, Michael.
So if you're looking for just one more, as long as you do that, I'm going to do this very quickly.
Yep.
It's not outside the top 20, but it's the 15th game, which is, again, in the context of the time, there's that word I keep hammering, the Northern Iowa game in 2011. Because
you and I allowed.
That was the game that meant everything.
Yep.
Because Northern Iowa was the king of the Valley, and the Bison were knocking on the door. The Bison had beat the Jackrabbits the week before.
Yeah.
I think Northern Iowa was like probably 2 in the country, and NDSU was 3 at the time. And that was one hell of a physical football game. It was just fantastic.
I remember we did our show.
I mean, the place was insane. We were talking about Georgia Southern loud, which we haven't even talked about. It was the Georgia Southern game in 2012. But that Northern Iowa game was just like, that's when I personally remember sitting there going, oh my God, is it loud in here?
I remember that we did our show afterwards, and that's when I asked you, I believe the Bison have a chance to maybe win the national championship. They've now beaten the team they could never beat. That this may have certainly the makings of a conference championship team, that they could maybe go and do something. And obviously we know the rest is history after that.
All right, we're done.
Nice job, Michael.
That was fun.
Awesome job, Mike.
Thanks for
really good,
talking
bud.
this over, guys. Eric Peterson, Dom Izzo, Jeff Kolpack, thank you all, boys. Again, if you're listening to this and have not consumed the 13,000 words I wrote about the Bison's top 75 games, please go to inforum.com and do so. I'd be happy to hear from you via email, via phone call. If you see me on the golf course or in the bar or something, either of those places, track me down. We can certainly talk it over and argue a little bit.
The Mississippi Valley State game from 2017 is not on here. 72-7.
76th. That was 76th. Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to inforum.com and search Mike McFeely.